Welcome to the Future Series. I'm your host, Anthony Dan, and for those of you that are new to the podcast, we talk with real founders about building a business for the future. Whether you're scaling your business currently or starting your first side hustle, we're able to give you the nuggets of information to help you succeed in the future of work. So today we've got Alison Humphries on the podcast from Recruitment Leadership. Alison, how are you doing?
Hi, Anthony. Great, and thank you very much for having me. It's good to be on.
Well, thank you for joining. For those of our listeners that are listening and haven't heard of you before, would you be able to give them just a quick overview of what you do and what Recruitment Leadership does?
Sure. So my career has been almost entirely in the recruitment sector, but spanning everything you can think of in there, for every sector from regulated healthcare to IT contractors, permanent contract search, temp, and all the way through to statement of works and master service provider. So I've actually been in the industry for a very, very, very long time, 4 decades. And nowadays, having been, been the MD of a business that was taken all the way through to sale, started and grown many other operations, nowadays I act as a board advisor and non-exec to other recruitment businesses to help them accelerate their growth.
Fantastic. There's a lot that I'd love to delve into. I'm sure there's lots of little nuggets that we could hopefully try and pull out from this conversation. But to start with, it'd be great to look back at the start of your career and those sort of where you started basically in recruitment and how that's built up over the years to being MD, going through the ups and the downs and the scales and the sales.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're able to take us a bit back to the beginning, where did you start? How did you get into recruitment?
Sure. We're going all the way back to 1985 now, and I started more or less straight out of university with a business that at the time was called Accountancy Personnel. So, clues in the name, right? But within months of me joining, that business was acquired by Hays, which at that point, interestingly, had nothing to do with recruitment. It was a shipping and chemicals company. In London we have a Hays wharf, so imagine something a bit like the East India Company. And Hays had been advised to get out of the old industrial markets that they were in and move to services, and recruitment being the great shining hope at that point. So it was their first acquisition, and it was a great time to be in what became Hays, if you were in the inner circle, if you like. I happened to be, and we were very fortunate then in having huge opportunities for growth. There was loads of funding available to open new offices, which is how you grew things in those days, with physical presence as much as possible, and to hire talent and so forth. So it gave someone like me the opportunity to run my own office when I was 21, run my own company when I was 22. And although, believe me, you're very accountable in that environment, nevertheless, you're not doing it with your own money. You're doing it under the umbrella of Hays, and that certainly brings advantages. So it was a really exciting time, actually. And eventually, I moved from there to, after I'd risen to be National Head of Learning and Development, I moved from there to a competitor called Robert Half, which those of your listeners who are in the US will definitely know. Perhaps slightly less well known in the UK, but still financial recruitment. But also got involved then in launching new brands. And we're at the turn of the century now, Anthony. So in my history, so I'll just rattle through the rest. At that point, I was looking for something a bit new, and there was a lot of talk about master service providers and different approaches to recruitment. And that was what I wanted to get involved in, and I'm really glad I did. So I did this for 2 PLCs. I started it from scratch and was successful in winning some huge contracts. So instead of arguing about P on a margin for a temp, these were contracts worth up to 9 figures, was the largest one that I personally negotiated. And I'm really glad I did, because I learned about an entirely different buying process, negotiation, and also the absolute critical nature of reliable fulfillment if you go into that market. So after that time, I was able to trade on all my relationships because all the people I'd worked with or managed before all went off and opened more recruitment businesses and welcomed my advice. So I started to do that. And quite recently, one of my clients that I was a non-exec for asked me to come on board full-time with a view to acting in their full-time MD in the run-up to a business sale, which we did, and it was completed. So now I take that story and show people that there are many different ways of doing it and making a valuable recruitment business. It's not just one.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that story about Hayes as well. I didn't know that that's how they started and where they came from.
It is interesting, isn't it? Someone gave them some great business advice, I think.
Yeah, well, clearly indeed. That's fascinating. I love, right place, right time with Hayes.
Yeah. When I talk to people about those days, which of course was pre-internet, pre-email, pre-everything, sometimes they're looking at me mystified. How did you ever make any money? Because we were reliant on good old traditional snail mail. It wasn't as bad then as it is now. And local awareness. And if you wanted to do research on a company before a meeting, you had to wait for a library to open, go round and get some out-of-date dusty old tome off the shelves that might tell you some, information about how the company was 5 years previous to that date. But there was a lot less competition in the market in those days. There was also a much smaller percentage of end user client companies that saw any value in using specialist recruiters, and you had to have a lot on the go. I think one of the most valuable things that I take from that time is the importance of networks, personal networks, because when your adverts couldn't, your reach would have been the Sunday Times supplements, appointment section, which was incidental on someone reading your ad that day, and or local presence. If you had that limit on your reach that people don't have these days, then you really had to stay in touch with candidates and clients. You had to make sure that you were redeploying people wherever possible, and that your account development skills were the best, because you just couldn't go casting your net wider. It wasn't physically really very possible. I take another important learning thing from those times, which is the importance of brand. Now, I don't doubt for 1 minute that Hayes' investment in their brand made the phone ring for us. I think when I speak very occasionally now to people who now work for Hayes, it still does. And although they perhaps have struggled a bit in recent years, that's still a very successful company. So the importance of brand and having clarity around that, knowing who you're talking to and what problems you solve for them, and genuinely developing some specialist understanding of what people in those the jobs you're placing do, I think is invaluable. To that end, as a lot of people who know me will tell you, I'm a great fan of in-person site visits to clients. You learn a great deal more about them than you do talking to someone with a bezel around their face, frankly.
Absolutely, no, I completely agree. And I think what you're saying there rings very true today as well. That skill of building relationships and your network, especially in this world of AI where the internet's now getting filled up with a lot of noise. Actually having those personal relationships and managing them is going to help set you above the rest.
Yes, but it is tricky. I don't want to take away from people here. There's so much clamour in the recruitment market. Here in the UK, we have had for many years an oversupply of agencies. It's very hard to grow beyond a critical point because of that proliferation. And there's some very inventive new and small agencies who do extremely well in their niche. But if you're looking to scale, then you're faced with a lot of challenges in terms of buying habits and cash flow and so forth. So because of the competition, yeah.
And if we sort of look back, I know you mentioned at 22 you sort of had your own business essentially inside of Hayes, and then were responsible for several other ones after that. Some might call it a bit of an entrepreneur within the sort of bubble of Hayes. But how was that, obviously being that young and having all that responsibility for driving a business forward? What was that like?
Well, obviously, I was a child prodigy, Dan. Do you know what? I think memories get a bit hazy, don't they? Recollections may vary, as the late Queen said. I think that I think that I could have done with some more support, probably. I think I took it all very seriously and put a great deal of pressure on myself. You know, interestingly, yes, at a very young age, but the support that I received was absolutely minimal. It was the classic recruitment pattern of Alison's a really good biller. Let's make her in charge of this. I hope that anyone who remembers me from those days is not bearing me any grudges. I don't think I was bad, but I think that more support with business strategy would probably have been helpful at the time.
Yeah. Well, pressure makes diamonds, doesn't it? So where you can be cooking and learning. Well, it's obviously, you obviously learned quite a lot, so you've gone on and developed from there. How was, obviously, Hayes being Hayes and then moving forward? I know you mentioned you were involved in some other smaller companies as well, helping with a startup. How was that different from being able to build within a larger company to actually building and growing outside?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. I didn't realise until I went outside to smaller, earlier stage businesses just how much business support, I mean, I'm talking back office, infrastructure and so forth, couldn't be taken for granted. The other piece is that if you're aiming for something, and I still get people saying to me, oh yeah, my plan is to build and sell in 3 to 5 years, and that 3 to 5 years never gets any closer for most people. There's a lack of awareness about what you have to do to build a great recruitment business. So I know lots of people who are great recruiters who set up a business, but they have zero idea about the difference between being a great recruiter and building a great recruitment business. Some of the companies that I've worked with, their directors, founders, CEOs have said to me words to the effect of, isn't this just a bit disproportionate? So, for example, internal hiring. I often find myself having conversations about what is the structure you are hiring someone to here. There's no defined learning and development. There's no defined career path. You haven't got different job descriptions and so forth. So, you know, what is your brand? And there's a lot of, well, we sort of work it out as we go along attitude, which does get people into trouble later on. So a classic pattern is to hire someone who, you know, is a useful number two. Yeah, your first hire, this might be, or certainly while you're still in single numbers. They're a useful number two. They get to know the business, they know the clients, but you, the founder, are still doing all the business development and then they're filling the jobs. It's really tempting to reward someone just for loyalty. And I've seen quite a few businesses where someone's been over-promoted for that reason because they've just been there the longest. They're not the most skilled, they don't have the most potential, but they sit on top of the pile. And if you imagine it as a metaphorical, you know, pile, then the expectation becomes that as the pile gets bigger and bigger and bigger, this person will just continue by doing nothing to rise to the top. But actually, the effect can be on an organisation's growth can be a pull down when you have someone like that who's over promoted. So that's one specific example. I think there are also some big differences in how you develop business, because I mentioned the importance of brand, and so a lot of that work was done centrally for us at Hayes. With a small business, the brand is literally you and your interactions with the public and these days what you're putting out on your LinkedIn profile or via direct mail and so forth. And one piece of advice I find myself giving very often to early stage businesses is be crystal clear about who you serve, what the challenges are that you solve for them, and what your point of difference is, because we're too crowded a market not to have a point of difference. And by the way, one of my pet hates is that thing where we all add together how many years we've been in the industry and say, oh, look, we have a combined 50 years of inexperience. No, you don't. You've got the same 10 years 5 times over, or 5 years 10 times over. It's not an equation that means anything. So have a point of difference, and ideally one that if you can't evidence it now, then build something that will allow you to evidence it in the future and act in accordance with that to get better and better at that point of difference. Because buyers value different things, don't they? There are some that value speed, some that value depth of insight, some that value the robustness of your process, just for example. And whatever you pick to go with, don't try to be all things to all people, because there isn't really room in the market for that now. And people will be thinking, hang on, wasn't that what Hayes became, all things to all people? There are limits on it, and obviously most of that was achieved long after I left Hayes anyway.
Yeah, interesting. And I like the bit you said about like the back office and the that sort of depth of business support from Hayes. I know there are quite a few different, I guess they're sort of investment companies that would invest in recruitment companies and provide a lot of that back office support. Have you ever worked with any of them, or what do you think about them coming in to help?
I think they can save you a lot of time. I would put a strong note of caution on this. There are investors who I know personally have taken advantage of business entrepreneurs who, yes, have failed to seek advice when they should have done. And even this year, I know of 2 separate cases where people have started up businesses. They hadn't understood what they were getting was a loan, and a loan that had to be paid back within 1 or 2 years. What they didn't fully realise is that the stake in the business that the lender was asking for was a permanent thing. And, you may say, well, it's their own fault. It was all there in black and white. But I would just suggest to you that you should take advice at an early stage if you're thinking about doing that, because very few of the people I know who have seen any real value from it, have seen any input from the investor, and they've lost the opportunity to work for themselves. They are in fact working for their investor, who owns a massive chunk of their business and isn't putting anything in personally. So yeah, it utterly depends on the model, I would say.
Yeah. And speaking of models, obviously there are so many different models and ways of working and industries. I know you said earlier yourself you've been involved in various different ones over the years. Like especially today, so I know there's like the rise of like tech recruiting. I know a lot of very successful tech recruiters, and various other ones as well. If you were setting up a recruitment company today, what industry do you see the biggest opportunity in growth, but also then what actual model?
Gosh, you really are asking me to put my money where my mouth is here. I think it would, if you're looking for fast growth, then I think I'd be very tempted to do something in the life sciences market. And in my view, I'm not saying that the permanent payment on results model is dead. It isn't. But I do think that the scale with which the industry has accepted that sure, we'll work on your job for 0 commitment, has been damaging, and clients now give very little commitment to agencies generally. So I don't think I would choose that. I think I would choose a model in which I've had success, which is a statement of works model, and I'd find clients who were willing to give me commitment to 100 vacancies a year or 50 vacancies a year, and I was willing to give them commitment to filling 100% of those. So you can actually do it if you've got that level of commitment. You can do it for a lot less in fees to the client than you have to charge contingent, because let's face it, if you are charging payment on results, the clients where you do make fees are paying for your work on all the others where you don't make fees. That's just financial logic, isn't it? So I think I would probably go down that route where there is going to be considerable investment for a long time. Reason you may ask, why not AI recruitment or something, is simply because that is already a very, very premium, oversupplied market. Lots of people in there. And we've got to consider not just the opportunity in the market, but also the difficulties of selling to it, the amount of friction on the way to winning, and whether you can establish a decent fee structure. If, on the other hand, I was an experienced recruiter looking to set up a business that maybe isn't going to grow as fast but will give me a steady income, then I'd probably be looking at a part of professional services. Finance and accountancy remains really buoyant, despite, just like recruiters, despite those professionals being very, very concerned about AI, it remains very buoyant and dynamic, and there is a consistency of demand there. So I might go there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, super interesting. It's just interesting to hear and sort of pick your mind as well.
And if I can just add one other aspect, the amount of uncertainty we have in the world and the economic challenges for employers in the UK specifically, and I'm talking here about the knock-on effects of minimum wage increases and employers' NI and the Employment Rights Act, means to me that logically employers will be looking for more and more for flexible labour solutions. And so if they did just straight permanent hiring before, I think that it's fairly obvious that they will be looking to do more of it on a contract or temporary basis, even if it's try before you buy. And then on that whole spectrum, if you move from permanent hiring, temp and contract, then you end up on the other end of the spectrum with pure statement of works, where the way that employers engage with people will be looking for guarantees, not paying people for time, but paying people for results.
Sounds like a good place to be on that end. Interesting as well, I know you're obviously based in the UK, I'm in the UK at the moment as well, and like you said, not a saturation, but there's a lot of recruitment companies in the UK that are setting up. The barrier to entry is relatively low. I know there used to be, maybe in the last sort of 5-10 years, a big push towards the States, and that being an amazing market to jump into. Looking at it now, I know you mentioned some companies maybe not going for the permanent route, looking at contract or temp workers, maybe abroad, maybe in different regions. Do you think that starting with a UK focus is maybe the wrong thing to do now? You should be looking, especially with the technology we've got now, looking a bit broader and starting as a European company maybe with one of the...
Right, well there's no doubt that some British recruiters have been very successful in the US. An awful lot more haven't, and that's because they've gone to replicate the UK model, and then they've hired people in those expensive coastal elites, and the cost of those businesses is huge. And in addition, I mean, while the salaries and therefore the placement fees look very attractive if you're a British recruiter, it occupies a different place, the recruitment industry. So I have to say, and having worked out there for a little bit, so this is first-hand experience, although not particularly recent, that I'm going to generalise. I don't think that the American recruitment market, talking about the homegrown market, is as sophisticated as the British one, with obviously notable exceptions. However, where they are ahead of us is the uptake of MSP and statement of works models, platforms for contractors to find their own work and so on. They're very much ahead of us, I think, in recruitment tech. Other differences... Sorry, I've forgotten what your question was. Did you ask me about differences?
Well, it was more as well about looking, if you were starting a company now, whether it should be...
Yes, sorry. My mistake. Okay.
Niche focus
if I can give you a slightly nuanced answer to that. One of the things I would definitely look at is offshoring my provision. If you are hiring someone to do a 180 job, as in resourcing only, There's some really good talent that is accessible in, for example, South Africa. I've got to be realistic. It is going to cost you, for an experienced person, about half as much as an inexperienced person in the UK. So that's one of the unintended consequences of Rachel Reeves' policies. So there's a delivery thing there that you really have to consider. The second thing then I'd look at is not just where is there a high growth market, but also fragmented markets have always been a better target than for recruiters than those dominated by very, very large employers. Why? Well, obviously very, very large employers have a tremendous amount of buying power and negotiation power. They tend to put up barriers such as portals and preferred supplier lists to stop them being pestered by recruitment agencies, and they're therefore hard to break into. So I think that you've got it. That's really very dynamic market, and the US actually does remain so. But if you look at the rate they're offshoring their own labour force, they're actually recruiting themselves in EMEA to do back office functions and so forth, and South America. So you have to keep an eye on it. Just because there's one address for the head office doesn't mean that's where the recruitment is actually going on. And that's about as far as I'm willing to commit myself on where the markets are for the future.
Brilliant, I love it. And obviously being like how recruitment leadership, being a NED and going in and advising a lot of these different companies at the moment, AI is obviously coming into play, and I'm sure it is coming up in a lot of conversation. How have you found this sort of AI wave that's come in has affected how you work with companies, and has it, I know you said earlier that professional services companies, recruiters might be worried and scared about AI, but do you think that's warranted, and do you think it's going to have as big a change as people are scared about?
Well, the only reason to be scared is if you have a very, very routine and monotonous job where you're currently doing lots and lots of repetitious tasks, and or you don't believe that you have any capability to adapt. So, if you are I'm not keen on the phrase, but a lifelong learner, if you are the sort of person who has gone out and looked for new opportunities and tried new things, then you will, one would hope, have a positive attitude to what it will empower you to do, rather than what it will take away from you. So the emphasis should be on greater freedom and productivity to do the bits that can't be done by AI. Yeah, I think that's what I'd hire for now, to be honest. And there are some very, very good psychometric evaluations that help you with this. I would be hiring with a strong eye on teachability and adaptability. There are two big areas where I see businesses actually achieving good return on investment now. I don't think I'd have given you that answer. I'd have said a lot of people are out there buying shiny new things, but haven't seen anyone make it pay yet.
Yeah.
So we've moved from beyond the single application AI, in a box that was a huge part of the market, say 2 years ago, 1 year ago, because the enthusiastic uptakers have realised the limitations of that. And more as we get more familiar with the idea of agentic AI actually engineering our business processes for us more efficiently, rather than generative AI just being used to save an individual recruiter 20 minutes a day writing content or emails or whatever. More and more we're looking at fully integrated use of AI in our systems. So I see two big areas where recruiters of most sizes now are serious and they have implemented something, and it always takes a bit longer than you think. One is, of course, if essential admin functions. Onboarding's a good example. Interview arrangements and other, like chases for feedback and so on. The other, which overlaps, is using AI to mobilise your CRM. And any business worth its salt is sitting on a CRM, which should be its most valuable asset, but is very often it's just a data graveyard. Why? Because it doesn't matter how many years you have been asking your recruiters to put it in the CRM, make sure the database is up to date. Until very recently, there was extremely limited payback for them. And if you think about it, all our reward systems in most recruitment businesses, all our reward systems have nothing related to the calibre of your CRM maintenance. They are all rewarding for who filled the job, right? And then people ask, well, hang on, why is nobody doing any business development? Why is nobody keeping the database up to date? Well, because of your reward system, essentially. Now, recruiters are beginning to see that there is value in keeping it up to date, and that as job boards have become, and LinkedIn licenses have become more and more expensive, they've got a gold mine sitting there that if they can use some of the great AI tools that are out there, naming no names, then they could be filling their jobs quicker, they could be getting better reviews from candidates, they could be starting 3 steps up the process ladder with a new job because we already hold a load of data on candidates, rather than going out and starting the process all over again on job boards. It's astonishing to me that I still meet with so many businesses where the second largest item on their profit and loss account after staff costs is LinkedIn recruiter licenses, because despite what people have grown to believe, nobody actually needs one. If you can use AI to write effective prompts, you can do what you do on LinkedIn. Maybe not the vacancy management end of it, but certainly the applicant tracking bit. And we've become a bit dependent on those things, whereas actually we should be investing in the calibre of our database if you've got any form of specialism.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Our company that we had always had a messy database, but this was a few years ago before we could probably have leveraged the AI now to really sort it out and be able to make it usable, which is super interesting, important, and great to hear as well. I know we've not got a massive amount of time left now, but would love to know what the sort of future of recruitment leadership looks like. What are you looking to work with? Get X number of companies up to exit, or what does the future look like for you?
So exit. I'd love to do that, to go again, but not as the full-time MD or CEO. To be honest, I'm a little bit too long in the tooth for that now, Anthony. As an advisor, it's a great journey to go on with people. But I think more and more as I look around at the enormous talent and enthusiasm that I do meet in the recruitment community, I think that there are different definitions of success, and one of them is having just a really good income in the future. One of them is being able to just step off the treadmill a bit and still have an income, and these slightly more modest aspirations, rather than I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 35. I think the more modest aspirations are very, very understandable. And if you're a millionaire at 35, do you know what? It doesn't last that long. Life's expensive. So I think we need to look at alternative methods of success and how you get there. And even if you then revise your definition of success later on, that's fine. The exclusive goal of selling for millions, I think is a bit daft, because statistically very, very few make that. Very few.
Really interesting. Well, it's been super great chatting to you and hearing all these different insights. I'm sure there'll be a lot of companies or recruiters that might be listening and thinking, I'd love to have a chat with Alison. Like, what would be the best way for them to get in touch if they're interested in your advice?
Oh, thank you. The best way is to either connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's I'm an honorary fellow of the REC. So look for Alison Humphries on FREG, or email me. It's alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alison. It's been really, really good to chat to you and hear these really sort of in-depth insights. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.